I had one guy come in, he did some drop sets with me, and he said he was using these 30 kilos and then whatever. And I said, well, let's start maybe 10 kilos lighter, mate. And he did it. And then after the first set, he was like, fuck up. In between my drops, I was resting 45 seconds, Steve. I said, nah, mate, you get 10 to 15 seconds with me, mate. This is how we're meant to do it.
So Steve, welcome back to the show. We're doing this little training series now, right? We've done how to set up your training program. We've got people ready with their home gyms and their fitness watches. And we've talked about how to progress training. So I wanted to go use this episode to start delving deeper into specific goals. And I think the one that most people are going to care about is going to be hypertrophy. So I think it's really important to sort of break down what it is, how we program for it, and give people maybe who are just stuck in 3 sets of 8 to 12, a few ideas and some programs that we like to use with ourselves and our clients. So before we get stuck into our lists of the programs we like, what do you think are the most sort of like overlooked key things that people need to focus on when training to build muscle?
Yeah, so first to simplify what hypertrophy is, because the missus always says, why do you always say hypertrophy? Stop saying hypertrophy. I hate that word. Hypertrophy simply means muscle growth, yes? Mass to build muscle, get jacked, all right? And there's a few ways we can do it, all right? But I think people do get caught in that 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8 mindset, because it's what's promoted a lot and it's quite simple to follow. But as you know, the most fundamental thing when we're trying to build muscle is, that overload principle like we discussed last week.
So when it why is it if you say it's 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8, it's quite simple to follow. If that's the case, what's the problem with it? Why do people not stick at these programs?
I think obviously building muscle is multifactorial. Like there's a lot of different ways we can train, different methods we can apply, different sort of principles that we can apply to building muscle, which we'll discuss. And people just aren't educated on those things, and they just think that you need to just get in a gym, hit a load of reps, work really fucking hard, and then get out. When, as we know, that's just not the case, is it? We need to apply different types of techniques, and we need to apply different strategies so that we can hit these sort of principles without overloading theme to allow muscle to build.
Yeah, I think with hypertrophy, it's one of those weird goals where it's a halfway house between really scientific and just grip and fucking rip. And we get people in both camps that fail to build muscle. The people who go super into percentage-based stuff and sets and rep schemes and overdo it, and they don't build any muscle because they don't train hard enough. And we get the people that just train hard and just smash the joints to smithereens because they're not actually thinking about how to train. So I went back to the UK. I did a 5-hour workshop with Tom Hibbert from Winning Health in Southampton, and talking about hypertrophy. And his stuff is more strength than hypertrophy training. And the biggest takeaway I took from that time is that if he was training a strength athlete to peak for like a world's strongest man competition, which he does quite often, or peaking someone's log lift and things like that, he's going to be looking at the nuance. He's going to be looking at the specifics when it comes to percentage and loads and peaking and periodization. Whereas what he says when it comes to building tissue is like, what does your client enjoy doing? What allows them to train hard enough? And I think that's often a missed thing with coaches where they start thinking of what is optimal, that they don't actually think of what is practical.
Yeah.
If there's any bit of research that holds its weight in gold when it comes to building muscle, is that you need to be within 1 and 5 reps of failure. We spoke about last week of how you find that, because people don't know what that actually feels like. But if you want to learn that, go listen to last week's show. But if we know that's the case, then whatever method you choose, before we actually think of how to make it perfect, look at recovery and all that sort of stuff, what training system do you go into the gym more days than not, enjoying the process enough to train hard enough? If you hate it, you're rushing it, you're not training hard and you're leaving, it's not the right training program, even if it's perfectly written.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's the case for any goal and any method and any person. And any sort of diet as well. You know, it's the one that someone's going to stick to, persevere with long enough to make change and get results. However, you know, there's a time and place that you do have to get stuck in and follow something that sometimes you might not enjoy, right? It's like, why do you hire a coach, Si? Because he's going to give you shit that you don't enjoy doing sometimes, isn't it? So that's also important as well. Sometimes you do have to, you know, I think, you know, psychology is important in it so that you can long-term progress and stick to something. But that's why we hire coaches, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a middle ground here, right? Like if you hate, I always ask a client when they say, can we do something else? I hate this exercise. There's always one question I ask, and anyone listening to this who doesn't keep skipping a certain exercise because they hate it, in inverted commas, is, do you hate this because you generally hate the exercise? Or do you hate this because it's hard? Because whatever I replace it with will also be hard if done right. So if I hate, let's say, back squats because they don't feel right, or I feel tight, or I just don't like them, I just don't enjoy the feeling of them, fine, we can change it, we can get into a habit. But if I hate back squats because they're hard, we need to do some hard stuff, because we know to get to the end goal that we're looking for, we need to train 1 to 5 reps within close to proximity of failure. So whether I do it with a hack squat, a split squat, a leg press, or a back squat, we need to hit that target.
Yeah. I think, like, you know, as coaches, that's why it's so important that you understand physiology and understand how to apply biomechanics and have training experience, so that you kind of understand the framework of how to build muscle, or whatever your goal is. Yeah, let's hypertrophy. Yeah, you understand the framework of how to build muscle, and then you can make tweaks and manipulate depending on all those things that you mentioned. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we don't need to squat to build legs. Let's fucking hack squat, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Whatever. So I think coaches need to. That's why they need to study these things. You know.
Yeah, I agree, and sure, that goes on to a little bit in terms of execution standpoints as well. It's like, the more you understand your anatomy, the more you understand mechanics and setups, the more you can make adjustments to things to make it easier to follow. A lot of people hate certain exercises sometimes because they just don't feel right, and it's because they don't know how to line things up. They don't have to set people up. They don't have to initiate. And if you can I find now that when I'm working with clients, it's very rare that I don't get somebody getting an exercise within a couple of cues. And it's because now I've learned enough about how to set exercises up that it's easier to do it right than wrong. So that fumbling around, that uncertainty, that confusion happens less and less, because I put someone in a position where they want to train the lats. Okay, I think down with the elbow. Done. I want to get someone to train the glutes and incline hyper. I've got them set up where it's easy. They only have to think about one thing. And if you don't know that, maybe it's good to start going. If you're training and you don't know what muscle you're supposed to work, or you don't know what that muscle does, I'm not saying you need to understand anatomy full on if you're just someone that wants to go in and put a bit of muscle on. But knowing your pec goes in and not goes pushing out is going to completely change how you perform that lift, and in turn, the results you get from that lift.
I think once you are organized in the right way, like once you can organize someone in the correct positions, and let's say like that word, organize, once you're organized, you will execute skill and coordinate your body perfectly.
Define organize.
Most of the time, right? Most of the time, skill will be good. Obviously, people are always going to lack some sort of capacities, you know what I mean? Like they're going to have restricted lats, or, you know what I mean, inhibited glutes because of tight hip flexors potentially. And these things you always train around. But generally, if you organize someone and set them up in the right way, there's not much coaching and cueing that you need to do, right?
What do you find as organized? How do you define someone who is organized?
Well, I'm using it in the term of like set up position. Yeah. Like how can we organize someone, set them up correctly? Like I said, we understand the framework of mechanics and how this exercise needs to look, because we understand, the muscle and levers and how the muscle needs to work, and we know that we want to build this muscle here. Okay, well, how does this person's anthropometrics and all injuries, etc., line up to this exercise? All right, we discussed it in the past. When you talk about someone who maybe have a more of a barrel looking chest, then the bench press may be good for them to build the chest, right? And you know, someone like me probably not, you know. So I think, you know, that's why it's important that we understand those things as coaches, and you know.
So when you look at, when someone comes in the gym, you see a lot of people, you probably got into it. You said last week you go and train at a commercial gym once a week, right? So when you're looking at people going in there and training, I'm presuming to build muscle, what's the biggest mistakes you see? What are the things that people should focus more time on in the session before we look at the bigger picture? And what's things you think people need to focus less time on?
You know what? I think, like, what I've observed in the last few months training at a commercial gym is that I think the guys use too much momentum when they lift. Yeah, they use too much momentum, and they don't like know how to control weights. You know what I mean? A cue I've been using so much lately for all my clients and anyone I work with is be patient on the way down. It's a fantastic cue. Patience on the way down. Bring the bar down. You're perfect, but be more patient. And they just bring that bar down with real smooth control, and they rocket it back up. So people aren't patient on that negative, that eccentric repetition. If you're a bit more patient, you'll spend a bit longer in the set over the reps, and you'll stimulate better hypertrophy.
Yes, I absolutely could agree more with that. There's something that stuck out that Ben Bukolski taught me was that I've actually got a pen in my hand, which actually works nicely. But I'm left-handed, right? So if I switch hands and try to sign my name in my right hand, I wouldn't go quickly because my nervous system is not adapt to do that. I would go slow and purposeful. You earn the right to go quick. So you spoke about last week about exploding weight up and playing around with speed in training. Now, that's fine if you're somebody, but people always go, well, watch bodybuilding videos on YouTube and they all lift weight really quickly. Yeah, but when Arnie or Dorian Yates does a dumbbell press quickly, they are so attuned to what they are doing that even though they're doing it quickly, they're getting as much out of it as you doing it slowly.
Yeah,
totally. When you do it quickly, you lose position, you lose stability. It's a different set of rules. Yeah, and totally. Another thing I always say when I look at clients is like, if I hold, and this is good for the YouTube listeners more so than the audio, but I'll explain it. If I hold my pen up here and I just drop this into my other hand, what muscles were needed to drop that pen? None. It's gravity. Gravity did all of the work. Nothing was come from your muscular system. Now, if I put this pen down and I was like, I'm going to slowly lower it to my hand, things have to resist the weight. Obviously, not much weight, it's a pen, but things have to resist the weight of that. So when we're looking at, and we'll talk about this in a second, in terms of what actually drives hypertrophy, we want to create as much mechanical tension as possible. There is no mechanical tension on a drop.
Correct.
So how do you teach people, other than saying be patient, how do you teach people to control weight? What should it feel like if someone doesn't have any idea?
Well, I think, you know, being able to feel the muscle working is important, obviously. You know, like being able to have that mind-muscle connection is important. It's not like something that you have to overemphasize, but with someone that's trying to build muscle, you know, it's important that they can feel a muscle group working and get blood flow into it, etc. Especially with moderate to lighter loads, right?
I think it's also worth mentioning though, like, because I know a lot of clients get confused on this, is that depending on the exercise and the position, feeling a muscle working will be different depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, true.
People explain this, right? I can feel my quads on a hack squat and I can feel my quads on a leg extension. But those two sensations are very, very, very different. In the same way that me feeling my chest on a dumbbell press and me feeling my chest on a cable fly are different. Because in the shorter position, you're going to feel that pump, that squeeze, that burn. It doesn't feel quite the same in a bigger, more compound lift. So I think while what Steve's saying is right in terms of you want to be able to feel the muscle, learn to initiate from the muscle, don't try and go into these exercises thinking everything should feel the same as the cable fly, or everything should feel the same as the leg extension, or the single arm cable row. Because I think a lot of people almost get lost in that going, well, I can't feel the squeeze, so it's not working. If you're moving in the right way, if you're initiating from it, it will work.
Yeah.
But if you feel nothing, if you're away with the fairies thinking of your next meeting, that's a completely different story.
So I think that's an important one, you know, especially for beginners anyway. You know, understanding how muscles work during like specific exercises. Yeah, like, you know, feeling muscles work, you know, especially during those isolated exercises that we're trying to work, you know. And then, like, you know, just controlling loads, and if they can't control loads, then working out why they can't skillfully do that, because it should be pretty basic in it to move weights. It's pretty basic coordination patterns. Yeah, if they can't do that, then we might use sort of like isometric tension, you know, where we just hold positions, for example, and make exercises harder like that.
I think one of the biggest things I look at when I go into a commercial gym that I think would really, really help people, one is understanding this proximity to failure. So let's break this down. If I need to be, and I'm going to bang this home because I think people generally don't train hard enough. If we need to be within this proximity to failure, people think squats, bench, and deadlifts are the king of exercises, and people rush to do those exercises. They are the basics, and we've spoken about it before that these things are far from basic. Back squat, you have to control your ankle, your knee, your hip, your spine, your shoulder. Right? You've got to do so much. So if any of those things don't work very well, you're now going to lose power, you're going to lose stability, and you're not going to be able to take that to failure. So is that the best exercise for you to grow your quads? Putting aside structure, and even it's the best exercise for your frame. So when we look at that, okay, I need to get that close to failure. So I need to pick an exercise that is stable enough at some point in my program. I'm not saying you never should back squat, but at some point in my program, there should be an exercise that allows me to go to that place. So now I can start to look at things from a stability standpoint rather than, and what the muscle does standpoint, rather than my mate squats, so I must squat. Because I think people rush to the most complex things so quickly, and they're scared to regress because it makes them feel like they failed. When in reality, you should regress an exercise to the point where you don't have to think about execution. If you're doing a back squat that's all over the place, regress to a heels elevated goblet squat. If you can then control that, that's a better exercise for you right now than the back squat, no matter what social media tells you. And then you can kind of go, right, let's take a step up. Let's take a step up. Let's take a step up until we find that point. What is the biggest exercise you can do for your frame that allows you to load, train hard enough, and safely, and go to failure? I think people would progress way too quickly. They go to the most advanced list they can find because they feel they should.
I think like what people have to understand is that the fundamental stimulus for building muscle, hypertrophy, tissue hypertrophy, is physical loading. And then what you do with that physical loading, the adaptation that you get from it. And there's many different ways to apply that physical loading. Like, as we discussed last week, you know, could be load, it could be tempo, it could be speed, all different stuff, you know. And then which exercise do we use to do that based on the individual? So, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, what do you think about time under tension?
What do I think about it?
Yeah.
I think it's
for hypertrophy, time under tension for hypertrophy.
Incredibly important, but overestimated at the same time. So what I mean by that is that I could do a bench press and I could physically load, using your example of physically load the bench press more and more and more. And we spoke about it earlier on. You mentioned about rib cage position, right? Now, if I've got a big barrel rib cage, I just load the bench press and my chest's going to go, because that lever for my chest is going to be the big prime mover in this. Me, and to some extent, you got a better rib cage than I do, but like flatter rib cage guys, I could physically load that bench press forever, but that bench press is going to be primarily looking on my chest, my delts, and my triceps, because there's not a great ability to put tension on my pec. Also, if I don't know how to engage my pec and how to use it, what am I overloading? Yes, I'm overloading. Yes, I am building muscle, but am I building muscle in the area that I want to build muscle? Probably not. There's going to be some, because it's a bench press. It's going to hit it to a degree, but it's not going to be the most optimal way of doing that. So I think, yes, it's important to put more time and attention, but not at the expense of, let's grab some tiny little 1 kilo cable dumbbells and squeeze the shit out of it with no load. Like, understand how to use it, load the fuck out of it. Is that where you're kind of going with this?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like for anyone that doesn't understand that the time under tension theory, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's pretty much a theory. It's basically, should we say 40 seconds of time? 40 seconds.
But 40 to 60 seconds of time in the gym. Is it 40 to 70 is the general?
Let's say 40 to 60 for hypertrophy is what you need to build muscle. But I mean, there's a lot of things that, like you're saying, you know, like, are you creating tension on that muscle? And, you know, if time and attention was the primary shout for building muscle, then runners would potentially be really big, right? Because they spend a lot of time on their legs, right? Time and attention.
But when you look at things like Cassim's time, I quite like this. He uses time under sustained tension or time under significant tension.
Time under critical tension. I think that's a good one as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like runners, it's low. It's very, very low intensity. You're not going anywhere near failure, so it's not significant enough of a tension. And let's put aside the fact that runners are going to expend a fuckload of calories, so they're not going to be in a surplus and eat enough to actually gain muscle anyway, which is another topic.
But I tell you what, devil's advocate, to push back against that, the studies that show isometric loading to failure.
Yeah.
Right. You're pushing that limit there. Isometrics, creating a lot of time and attention, like tension. But you don't get great hypertrophy just doing isometrics.
No.
The time and attention is relatively a lot shorter. So,
but that's where that term significant comes in, right? Because if I isometric bicep, I do an isometric bicep, right? And I'm pushing against something above me. I can push, there's a ledge and I'm pushing onto that, right? That's going to be time. But if I all of a sudden then gave you a really heavy set of dumbbells and you do the isometric, because there's more gravity than there was before me pushing up, that's going to be a very different stimulus. Now, is that going to be as good as lifting the weight? No, but is it the significance? A good study would be, I've got a bar and I'm pushing against that as hard as I can until my biceps fail, compared to me trying to hold a set of 20-kilo dumbbells here till I fail. Is there difference in hypertrophy in those two scenarios? I don't know if studies been done like that.
Yeah, I think they have. Yeah, there are different types of isometric contractions. One's overcoming and
yielding.
Yielding, yeah. I think like there's a few things that when it comes to hypertrophy, you don't build. People need to understand that when you're training, it's not instantaneous. You don't just train and then build muscle when you're training. It's the adaptation, the recovery period where we build muscle, which is why getting an adaptation is really important. Nutrition, rest, sleep, etc. But what we do in the gym is still very, very important. And what you're talking about there, that there's a minimum threshold of intensity and load that we have to apply. And that's sort of basically like how heavy you're lifting. And I think a good way to think about it for people that might not understand the technical side of like loads and stuff is, if you stick to using a third of your heaviest load, so like 66%, for percentages wise, so if you use a third of what you can lift, so if you can lift 100 kilo on the bench, you're probably best to stick to 66, 70% upwards to meet that minimum sort of threshold load, right?
Yeah, I think the key thing I want to come back to with that was that you don't grow in the gym. Because I think this brings us on to another mistake that I tend to see people making, is that they think they grow in the gym. So I think if I do 4 sessions a week, if I do 8 sessions a week, if I do twice a day training, I'm going to grow more muscle. And while I have seen people grow tremendous amounts of muscle on twice a day training, we both have. We did twice a day training together, right? Which I'll tell the story of that in a second, because I think that was quite that sums up a problem with twice a day training. But you actually doing the opposite of growth in the gym. You're breaking down in the gym. You're creating a stimulus for growth, but you're actually breaking down. So if in doubt, do the minimum effective dose, and you can always start to ramp from there. If you're the first time you're walking in the gym, Don't grab a John Meadows program, may he rest in peace. As good as they are so high volume, and they're often 6 days a week. And yes, some of them are pump days. It's walking, it's running before you can walk. It's jumping in at the deep end, right? Totally. Let's start 3 days, full body, learn to engage, then maybe go to 4 days. Can you recover? If you want to push 5 days, maybe. But I train 4 days. Most people train 4 days. And I've seen people build incredible physiques on 3, let alone 4.
3, yeah. Totally.
So it's finding that sort of like balance. But going back to because I always like this story because I think it shows that we don't always get it right ourselves. I remember we did the twice a day training, right? And we both got bigger and we both got leaner. It was written by Mr. Luke McGurk, right? So for those of you who don't understand the twice a day training method, popularized by Charles Poliquin, popularized even further by Nick Mitchell when he took Glenn Parker through his incredible transformation of the twice a day. So you do strength in the morning, so prime the nervous system, get these big numbers up, put a significant amount of load, and then you do your hypertrophy pump stuff in the afternoon. Same muscle group, twice a day training. And you ramp the food up to obviously allow you to recover. If you're not eating enough food, you aren't going to recover from twice a day training. So we were ramping up like 350, 400 plus grams of carbohydrates. I was eating ice cream and getting bigger and leaner. And we did 4 weeks of this and we were like, we're getting really good results. But then we forgot, I forgot more than you, because I'm much more of a secret fatty than you are, that we were starting off our junior years. We didn't have, it was a paid internship. We didn't have that many clients, but we got clients. So that twice a day, 5 days a week turned to twice a day, 3 times a week, to once a day, 5 times a week, to 4 times a week training. But the food didn't change. So all of a sudden I was still having so many calories and now training 4 times a week. And I got so fat so quickly. I don't think I've ever lost a physique as quick as that in my life.
Yeah. And again, it's back to that first one that we mentioned earlier, is like what's realistic and what's sustainable, you know? That's certainly not realistic and sustainable for most people.
Absolutely not. Worth trying every now and again. One of the things I do want to do, I have done it, but not in a while. Try some of the Wolfgang Unsold like holidays. So if people don't, Wolfgang Unsold's a German.
I've done the squat one.
You've done the squat one. The 3 days, 3 times a day. How did it add an inch on your legs in a week, like he says?
No. I got a little bit stronger. Oh, no. I got a lot stronger. But I beat myself up so much that it took me a year or 2 to recover from the damages that I got.
Were you stronger start of the week to end of the week, or were you weaker at the end of the week, then you took a couple of weeks off and then you were stronger? Did you super compensate to be stronger, or did you get stronger?
No, I was stronger at the end of it.
Oh, wow, okay.
Stronger at the end of it. I lifted heavier, and then I think I went on holiday and traveled after that. So, you know, I didn't carry the benefit over. But I know a few people that have done it. I think that stuff's too fancy. I think it's too fancy. It's unnecessary. I think it's just a sales tool because it looks cool and it's novelty. I think it's overkill.
I think it's overkill. I think it's an experience, though. And I think sometimes pushing, and one of my favorite, when we talk about 3 favorite training methods for hypertrophy, my periodization methods later, I talk about this, but I think there's a time and a place to push the boundaries. I don't think it has to be twice a day training, but to allow yourself to go, right, this is out my comfort zone. This is more than I can recover from for a short period of time. And then you take a week off of training, and then you allow yourself to super compensate and recover. I think it works better, though, on smaller muscles. So the Wolfgang Unsold, he started the squat holiday, which is a week of 3 days, times a day squatting. And then for people that don't know his work, he did he did weekends. So squat weekend, back weekend, chest weekend. And I've got the arm weekend book and I want to do it. And I think that would work because it doesn't take you, the elbows might not like it, but it won't take as long to recover from 3 times a day arm training for 3 days than a week's worth of squats. Because at least your nervous system isn't going to be destroyed.
But this is the thing as well, like you just said, like that you just mentioned in that sentence. Like when we're building muscle, we're not just building muscle. There's the connective tissues, the ligaments, the tendons, all those passive structures and non-passive structures that we have to like look after as well. So we're limited on that. and how prepped we are. So I think there's more simple ways to create, you know, a nice novelty experience for a muscle, you know, like there's more simple ways, I think, you know, intensity based methods, you know.
Yeah. On that note, because I think this is important. One of the big things I think in terms of building muscle, another thing I think regular gym goers mistake, and this isn't actually directly about building muscle, but we've got to think of longevity. Losing fat, if we talk fat loss, we're talking 12 to 20 weeks, and you can start and finish within that time. Building muscle, you're looking at, in a bulking cycle, probably good 12 to 18 months worth of building tissue. Then you're probably going to do it again and again and again. And you're looking at repeat cycles of this. So we need to have something that you can train progressively for the rest of your life, right? So there are certain things, and this is where the mechanics comes in. When anyone that goes and understands Instagram enough and strength coaches, you'll see people talk about dumbbells with bicep curls and EZ bars, and you go, well, I do straight bar bicep curls because Arnie does them, and he has no issues. I don't get any pain. And then what you realize is, you know, all the people that are now preaching using dumbbells and EZ bars and cables and things that line up better, they all thought like you at 24, and now they all have fucked up elbows.
Yeah, fucked up elbows.
I want everyone listening to this, wherever you're doing, whether you're standing, sitting, whatever you do, I want you to try this. I want you to lock your shoulders back and down, and I want you to try and turn your palms to the face of the room. Not overly force it, just see where they sit. What you'll find for 90% of you, you're not going to fully supinate. Your pinkies aren't going to be pointing furthest forward. You're going to be somewhere on an angle. So, right? So for the people on YouTube, you can see this. This is my angle, right? I'm coming in at about 10, 15 degrees. Now, for me, that is the only thing moving, the only thing working is my hinge joint to my elbow. If I crank that as far than I can, it already feels awkward. Now I try and add a bar to that. A straight bar forces me into that position. So maybe switching to an EZ bar or dumbbells allows you to line things up with the bicep better, get better recruitment of that muscle, and save your elbows in the future. Now, for those people who are actually doing what I say, take that supination, and I want you to slowly raise your arms overhead and see where you end up. In this position, I'm going to come here. I've got even less supination. Supination is basically turning your palms out overhead than I do at my sides. Now, everybody that sits there and tries to say they want to do supinated chin-ups, what are you doing to your elbows and your shoulders, man? No wonder you're getting nickeled.
You're messing them up big time.
Yeah. Some people do. I know people that have great supination, but I tell you what, it's less than 5% of people I've met. It might not hurt now, but it'll hurt in 5 years. So think of longevity. Your butt may not bother you when you're 6 foot 4 with long femurs, but look at your structure. If you need to elevate your heels in a squat to save your spine now, do it. If you don't have great external rotation and thoracic extension, get a safety bar, do front squats, right? Rather than going, no, I'm going to get into a back squat because that's what Arnie said. And people that can't see me, you can see me trying to get into that position. Just don't do it. You can get really strong on a safety bar. You're not entering a powerlifting competition, most of you, right? Steve here has great mobility through the shoulder. Absolutely brilliant. Watch him back squats. Thing of beauty, right? So he can back squat for the rest of his life, probably relatively pain-free. I couldn't. Our training is going to be slightly different. Doesn't mean it's less or more effective. I just choose exercises that are suited to me, like you choose exercises that are suited to you. And I think that's one of the things that I wasn't thinking about at the start of this episode, but I bet people listen to this will get niggles. I've got niggles that I could have avoided if I paid.
Well, I think we'll definitely do that. I think upcoming we'll talk about force and mechanics and applying certain exercises based on that. I think that's a really good one to discuss.
We'll have different thoughts on that as well, because I'm much more, I don't want to say much more mechanics because we're both mechanics, but we just come at it from different angles.
I just think people oversimplify mechanics for building muscle. And the problem is dictionary terminology is very different to mechanical terminology, such as force. Force in biomechanics is completely different to how you will interpret from the dictionary, and instantaneous, like power, mechanical power, and these terms. and people don't use the right terminology, I think. So that's where, you know, people get confused, etc.
I also think people's understanding of anatomy comes from anatomy apps. So, which is fine. This is where you start, right? You start, learn origin, insertion, action, right? Cool, fine. I did it. I still look at it. Not a problem. But I'm going to give you an example. For people who like their anatomy, listen to this, because I know a lot of coaches will listen to us. Adductors, right? Adductors go into your pelvis, they attach onto your femur, right? They adduct. So for people who don't know what adduct means, your leg comes towards the midline of the body. Clues in the name. Fantastic. Now, that's it. You look at your anatomy app, and that's what it does. That's all the adductors does. Okay, let's bring my hip up to 90 degrees. What do the adductors now do? You might adduct a bit, not much. The hip extensors. So that same muscle in a different position does a different thing. When people often also people don't know anatomy, and I know you do, but you said earlier on, tight hip flexors. Right? Hip flexors. There's sartorius, there's rec fem, there's psoas, there's iliacus. There's all these things, TFL, there's all these different things, right? Your rec fem might well be tight. But I see a lot of people trying to do this, trying to do things to release their psoas. One, good fucking luck, it's really deep. And two, it's such a small hip flexor, despite the one that people call hip flexors. And most of the time, it's an over-lengthened muscle.
Yes.
So like people oversimplify mechanics, they oversimplify anatomy.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But also overcomplicate it at the same time. It's a weird thing.
Yes.
You oversimplify it, or you overcomplicate it, but you've got to think about like your exercise has to look a bit more like a sex swing than an exercise. Load your fucking muscle in a position that works as close as you can get it to being optimal, right? And then I want you to absolutely sorry, for some reason I'm getting a FaceTime. Then load that muscle and then just load it. Find a position where it doesn't hurt, that you feel it, then just put some weight on it and lift some fucking weight. That was my rant. Yeah. You ranted last week. This is my turn.
No, it's good. I mean, you know, like it's important that, especially coaches, trainers may be listening to this, and it's important that they study these things and they don't, you know, go over the top, but also like don't simplify things too much, you know. I think that's very true in the biomechanics stuff, you know.
Biomechanics knowledge has made my programs easier. I pick a better exercise choice. I don't complicate a current exercise choice. So before I wanted to train glutes, I would do loads of squats and I would do like that, like deadlifts, things like this. Now I'll go an incline hyper or a hip thrust, and then I'll probably pick some sort of leg press for beginners, right? So my mechanics knowledge has gone, right, let's try and take that joint and put it in the most easiest position so they have to think about nothing else but this. I went through this, right? I've got to the point now, I was like, right, I use my mechanics knowledge to simplify my programs. But I have to stop myself doing it. I see myself writing programs and put words like contralateral in. I had a client recently, and what does that mean? I'm like, fucking hell, Sam, why have you written contralateral in a program? That's for me, ain't for them. Hold it in your opposite hand. Like, I see coaches, this is one I always see, is like they'll talk about, did you feel this in your glutes? Did you feel it in your bum? Like, did squeeze your teres major? What the fuck does that mean? Like, I see a lat pull down a lot, people poking their external rotators. Where are your lats? Where do people think your lats are? They're not up back of your shoulders.
I think we overemphasize the importance of what we can measure and what we already know. Observability bias.
I agree with that. I agree with that massively. Especially when you think of all this structure stuff, is you can test it, but most coaches don't have to do manual range of motion testing, right? Yes. I went and got mine done for me. So I know my structural issues, especially around the shoulders, are issues, right? That ain't going to be stretched out. But other people, it might be. We don't know. We don't have x-rays. So my job is to find an exercise that you can do safely and doesn't hurt. And then do it.
Until you,
I see people waste time trying to get people to deadlift, get people to squat. If it gets better, perfect. But at least if you haven't, at least you're not wasted time. You find an exercise you can do.
Yeah.
Same thing for your training, right? So going back into hypertrophy, bringing this back. When it comes to 3 drivers of hypertrophy, we've got mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. Go into that. Go into what's important. I know you have some notes on this. Go on to you think, what do people need to know about the process of building muscle in order to put this into their program?
So before those three things are critical, but just before, let's back up a little bit. There's two different types of muscle growth that can occur. We've got myofibrillar growth and sarcoplasmic growth. Myofibrillar refers to increasing the size of the components, the myofibrils in the muscle. And we do that mostly by heavy loads and lower rep ranges. And then the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, more of the number of components, the fluids, electrolytes, glycogen inside the muscle. We do that with more the moderate to high rep work. Okay. And then we have the three practical application sort of, what would you call them? Components, whatever, to training, like you just mentioned, the mechanical tension, muscle damage, and what's the last one?
I think that's definition of the same thing there, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
When you look at muscle damage, right? People used to think muscle damage was the big one, right? Muscle damage, you tear a muscle and it grows back stronger. Now, when we know now that mechanical tension is pretty much the one, right? And you said this, right? I call it mechanical tension, you call it progressive loading, right? But if I train a ridiculously hard leg session on Monday to the point where I create so much damage that one, my C series is so much lighter than my A series because I've destroyed myself, and I'm still waddling to the toilet on Thursday when my next leg session is supposed to be. Over the week, I've got less training volume. I have less mechanical tension, ergo less hypertrophy. Now, if I minimize the damage in that session, allow me to do 2 leg sessions where I split the volume between the two, I now can do more load and more tension on both of those days. Then that's muscle damage, right? That's out of the way. You create enough, but not too much. Then mechanical tension and metabolic stress. Mechanical tension is certainly myofibrillar hypertrophy. Metabolic stress is essentially sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. It's driving nutrients into cells. It's fueling hypertrophy rather than is actually causing hypertrophy, other than cell swelling. And you'd also argue, is cell swelling actually the benefits from a hypertrophy standpoint, other than fuel? Is that just creating more mechanical tension by the cell swelling effect anyway?
Well, you know, like the mechanical tension is like we would, you know, it's about force, developing force. And you know what the equation is for force, right?
Force times mass times acceleration.
Mass times acceleration. So mass times acceleration equals force. So the more force that we can apply, the more mechanical tension we can apply. This is where I have my rant all the time that everyone thinks.
Let me sit back in my chair. Hold on. I'm going to go for it.
Heavy fucking weights, mechanical tension. Let's lift some heavy weights. Well, why don't we flip that equation round? We can apply less mass or more acceleration to create the same amount of force. It's why Westside Barbell use dynamic speed days, and they can still, you know, I'm not going to say build muscle because, you know, we know what goes on down there. But like, you can build muscle. I believe you can build muscle by playing around with the force output, by using lower weights and using faster speeds to some degree to create your mechanical tension.
Yeah. And how do you create force to muscle? You create torque, right? So you could also change levers. So this is the thing as well. People lift heavier weights. And you said earlier on, one of the first thing you said you noticed is people use too much momentum. The easiest way to explain this, I think, is looking at a dumbbell lateral raise. Right? People get to a point where because we're weak up here and the weight's heaviest up here, and this bit's pretty pointless, we get to a point where we use momentum because we can't do anymore. Now, we can talk about cable lateral raises, and I think we spoke about this last week, of how that matches the strength profile better. But if I bend my arm, or if I put a cuff on my elbow, I've now shortened that lever. So in turn, I can put more load through that muscle in terms of weight on the bar, and then go a shorter distance, which means I can probably less chance of injury. And if I want to progress that, but the next plate up's too heavy, I could just bring that cuff down to the forearm or go quicker, like your argument. And I think the important thing there is there are so many ways to increase torque and force on a muscle. It doesn't just have to be load.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but the fundamental is like mechanical tension is probably the most important and fundamental thing that we need to apply. How we apply it will vary on the individual and, you know, experience and how you want to do it really, right? You know, whether you want to manipulate moment arms or resistant curves or speeds or loads, right? So, you know.
So when we're looking at this, so we're basically saying, for people who want to bring this back and simplify it, that mechanical tension, creating more force for whatever means necessary, it should be the majority of your training, with a little bit of the pump stuff, and just monitor how much like muscle damage you're doing, just so you end up not destroying yourself. Work, right?
Yeah.
Before we move on to periodization, is there anything else that people need to know? Because you're, you know, way more research in this than I am with your master's degree and your MSc behind your name. Is there anything else in terms of understanding how to build muscle that you feel people should need to know if they want to do this right?
The mechanical tension part is a big one. And like we both just said, there are different ways to create mechanical tension to apply force. We can apply we can apply greater loads, right? More mass or more acceleration, or we can aim to maybe, you know, if you're measuring stuff, you could maybe aim to produce more peak forces or rate of forces or the time of the force. There's different ways to do this. And that's a bit scientific, but it's something called impulse, which is more important than actually force. But we won't discuss that today. Maybe we'll do that on another topic. But mechanical tension is important, right? We need to lift heavy and focus on getting strong or powerful, okay? And then you spoke about muscle damage. I think muscle damage is important as well. And remember, like, what I like to think from a practical standpoint is, okay, muscle damage is important. We don't do too much because then we can't recover. And we don't do too little because it's not enough stimulus. So we need that bit in between. But when you think of your muscle damage from a practical standpoint, think of the mode of contraction that you're using to apply that muscle damage. Are you using eccentrics? Are you using concentric reps to failure? You know, that sort of stuff. I think or are you using more assisted reps with a partner? Yeah?
Yeah. This is where when you're looking at muscle damage as well, when we're talking about because I said at the start, I banged on about proximity to failure being the thing that drives hypertrophy. You go, hold on, isn't that muscle damage, Simon? Yes. But for a while, because of this term that muscle damage was the main one, everyone started doing tons of eccentric work. Now, without realizing the effect of tons of eccentrics that will do in terms of muscle damage and recovery and things like this. You're much harder to recover from. So yes, you do need to go to failure, but understand if you're going to use a lot of eccentrics to do that and create more muscle damage, understand you may not be able to do as much total volume per week. So you might have to do more. This is why people like Dorian Yates and high intensity bodybuilding and John Peters don't do crazy amounts of sets because they're doing a lot more within the set. If you now want to not do quite as many eccentrics, you just want to control it, like we spoke about earlier on, just learning how to control a weight, but we're not focusing on like 5 seconds down and isometrics and holds. You are going to failure via a concentric based method. So the lifting part, that's when you go closer to failure there. But the problem being is when you try and throw everything at the wall and we try and do both 5-second eccentric and to failure, and then we do 10 exercises per workout, and like it just becomes too much.
Yeah. And that's it, like managing the type of intensity method, so to speak, that you're going to use, you know, like you don't have to do all slow tempos and time under tensions and drop sets and fucking volumes, and like it's too much. Just pick 1 or 2 things, cycle it, and then change. You know what I mean?
That's a good segue. Do you think periodization is important for hypertrophy? And if so, how do you approach it?
And that's why it's important for hypertrophy, periodization.
How do you approach periodization? I said to you, Steve, write me a 16-week hypertrophy block. How would you periodize it?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that we create some minimum threshold, right? Some mechanical tension. All right. But that's not fixed. It changes over time. It changes with your training age. All right. How experienced you are. So the level of adaptation will change, like we discussed on previous episodes. Like a beginner makes more changes than someone who's more advanced. So we have to think about that. What level are you at? What sort of training experience have you got? All right?
And I'm just not to cut you off there, but I also think people talk about beginner gains, newbie gains. I don't think they're specific to a beginner. They're specific to a beginner stimulus. So you could train for 5 years, never knew how to engage your pec, and you will get beginner gains on your pec, but you might not get beginner gains on your quads because you are maybe better at doing that.
Totally. And just while you're saying that as well, I know you just said about the chest, like people need to understand muscle growth, hypertrophy, like muscles don't grow at the same rate or at the same degree. You know what I mean? So that's also very important to understand, you know?
So back to your periodization. You were talking about my periodization for my 16-week training block. So how would you put together?
So, you know, like I would certainly look at those sort of factors first, like how experienced are you, and what sort of methods have you used in the past? You know, we know that when you're trying to build muscle and get strong, you know, doing the same sort of stuff isn't always the best thing, right? We need novelty, maybe changing of the stimulus sometimes, especially if you're intermediate to advanced like yourself, right? That's where you can play with more things and get more fancy with things. But as a beginner, keep it basic, obviously. And then we want to create some, like we spoke about, metabolic stress. So what sort of methods can we use? Is it going to be drop sets? Is it going to be high rep sets? Is it going to be blood flow restriction training? And it really depends on what you've done and, you know, how we want to work and progress. You know what I mean? So
do you undulate that? So let's say, or do you undulate or do you use conjugate? So for people who understand periodization terminology, conjugate method is where you would do within all the training stimulus within one workout. So let's say your A series would be strength. So you had a lot of like mechanics to do load. B series might be functional hypertrophy. C series might be your pump work and this sort of stuff. Do you add that metabolic stress at the end of every workout and have a conjugate method? Or do you undulate where you do, let's say, a block of higher intensity work and then do a shorter block of higher volume metabolic stress work? Do you undulate block by block or do you go within the session?
So if I have a short window to work with someone, I'll combine it. I'll use the conjugate system. I'll combine it so that we can get some heavy ass loading going. We can get some muscle damage work going, maybe with some eccentric work or whatever, or force reps. And then we can get some higher work with some blood flow restriction or fucking drop sets or whatever. You know what I mean? If I've got a longer period of time, I know I'm working with someone for 6 months, 12 months, longer period of time, I'll take my time because we have more time to, you know, build technique, build volume, build training age and experience, and just slowly dip into different methods and progress someone. Don't give them everything at once. So it does depend on, you know, time that you have to work with someone. That's how I do it anyway, you know?
Yeah. I think for me, I agree with everything you said. It has to be very individual. You're looking at training age, looking at all these different things, and this will change over time. But I think I've now come to a point where I kind of have a system of how I periodize hypertrophy. And that I have a system that's very adaptable to the person's goals and the person's perspectives. So I'm generally a fan of looking at, I like the Mike Isotal model. I think it's very backed by research where you're looking at minimum effective volume to maximum adaptable volume. So I'm a very big fan of minimum effective dose. What's the least you can do in the gym? Stimulus you need and get out. So the main bulk of my training will be what I would call a high intensity bodybuilding approach. You're probably looking at 2 top sets, 1 big heavy set of 6 to 8, 1 back set of 10 to 12 per exercise. Done. And in my game is to make you more efficient. Over the course of that block, which will be by far the longest block, I'm going to slowly work up your sets until you find that threshold where you just can't recover from it. I'm then going to back off 5% and a run. Let's say you end up getting 3 sets on every main exercise for the muscle groups that you're focusing on. I will keep you there for a period of time until we start to see signs of overtraining, even at that level. And depending on what symptoms you get of overtraining, depends where I'll go. So if we start saying that you'd be more nervous system adaptation, I may go into like an accumulation style phase, more metabolic stress, a very short, okay, we've maxed out this high intensity stuff. Let's push the volume for a little bit where we almost push you out your comfort zone and maybe do some more isolation work and get some pump stuff. And then when we start seeing overtraining there, which will be a lot shorter, niggles and things like this, I use the strength phase as a deload. So 90% of my program, let's say 8 to 20 week block will be that main block. 3 to 4 week block of the high volume, 3 to 4 week block of strength. The high volume stuff drives nutrients into the cells, allows me to drive food up, allows them to be in a caloric surplus. The strength stuff allows them, let's say if you've maxed out on 6 reps of 80 kilos on bench press, that strength block might allow you to get to 85 kilos for 6 on bench press when we come back to that main block again. So they all complement each other well and they all deload. So my system is generally high intensity bodybuilding 90% of the time, 5% of the time, higher volume stuff, 5% of the time, strength stuff to bring up your maxes and then repeat. And I tend to go through that 3-phase system. So it's kind of accumulation intensification, but it's not. It's like reverse linear, then back down. It's like a wave. I call it my step method. It's not the step method in terms of a training system, but it's my step. I ramp up.
I love that. Yeah. That's a really good explanation on how you see it and how you do it. Actually, that's really nice to hear. Cool. That's nice.
I'll go into talk about our training methods in a second. I'll talk about the split I use that is also adaptable for the individual, but we can talk about it a bit.
Cool.
So going into that, we've got a little bit of time left before you have to shoot off. And we've gone into the understanding of hypertrophy. We go over the key mistakes that people make. And I said at the start of this that I wanted to have people taking away a few ideas and a bit of inspiration on training methods they may not have thought. The people that are stuck at 3 times 10, 4 times 8, and they're bored. So we're going to go, and I said to Steve to prepare this, we're going to take it in turns to go through our 3 favorite training methods for hypertrophy, our 3 sort of systems for our block, and our most overrated one that we think that gets way too much plaudits. So Steve, give me your first of your 3 favorite training methods and why.
My favorite hypertrophy training method are drop sets.
Okay, why? Why so?
I think they are grueling. I think they're hard. You have variation in whether you want to do sort of heavy drop sets or you can do light weighted drop sets for higher rep work. So the variation's there. But the drop set method just allows you to create more trauma to the muscle, and it teaches people how to really get out of their fucking comfort zone. You know what I mean? Really fucking push. You know what I mean? I had one guy come in, he did some drop sets with me, and he said he was using these 30 kilos and then whatever. And I said, what? Let's start maybe 10 kilos lighter, mate. And he did it. And then after the first set, he was like, fuck up. In between my drops, I was resting 45 seconds, Steve. I said, no, mate, you get 10 to 15 seconds with me, mate. This is how we're meant to do it. And then it was way lighter. You know what I mean? So the drop set method is fantastic. And there's many variations of it. But overall, I love drop sets.
I like a drop set method. And just for people listening to this, if you're wanting to try and put this together and you're thinking about hypertrophy plan, if you want to trial like my system of thinking here, think about this now. You've just used drop sets. And I spoke about that sort of accumulation, higher volume thing I put at the end of my main block. This could be one method you use for that. So if you write a program and you make a folder, all the higher volume blocks, you pick your favorite. And then you go into your strength block, pick your favorite. Then do your high intensity block, then pick a new one. Because often these things like drop sets and these higher volume ones, I often use them also to break mental plateaus in clients. Our clients are coached. Great results. If people follow me on Instagram, Jack, the Scottish guy, got really shredded. He did the high intensity block. He was just getting bored. He was just kind of going through the motion of his training. I threw something different in, which is one of mine in a second. And he was like, right, I'm reinvigorated. Because it's different, it's a pump and it feels good. So my first one is a bit boring because I've kind of already talked about it, but I'm going to follow up a little bit more, is this high intensity bodybuilding method. I think this underpins all of my programs for the reasons I've gone into. But also the way I came up with this method, other than reading a lot of what my kids stuff came about, is that I had clients that I use these traditional strength training methods, things that Charles Poliquin talks about. And I see people just like the people that are really good at training and just feel everything, and I've got a good mind muscle connection, just get it, especially because I'm dealing with lawyers and finance people. I'm not dealing with athletes that all can do this. Some people, it was just way too much volume for them. They couldn't handle it because they felt everything on their chest. So when I got to 4 or 5 sets, they just couldn't recover. So for them, 2 top sets is enough because they're efficient. But then I started to have problems with clients who, you know, when they come in the gym and you can tell no matter what you say, they're thinking of the last meeting, they're thinking of the next meeting. And these are clients where you tell them to slow down and they're swinging and they don't do it. Like, you just slow down. We're not counting the rep. We're not counting the rep. And I'm like, how do I still get a response from them, even though I don't trust to add more weight to the bar, because I know they're going to rush it because then they're away with the fairies. I had a set. I do the weight that I feel they're comfortable. I had a set. So let's say 12 to 25 reps, let's say, is for most muscles, probably that window. The person that's efficient and gets everything out of it, probably close to 12 to 15. That person who's a beginner just throws weight around might do a whole 25 sets. You might accumulate some more junk volume, but they're still getting enough volume because it's accumulated over 25 shit sets of chest per week, as opposed to 8 to 12 really good sets per week.
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why I do that split. And I said earlier on that I talk about how I use my split. I generally, this is not always, but this is my favorite split for this. I go front body, so chest, shoulders, quads, back body, glutes, hams, back. They're my first two. And in that, I'm going to get the minimum effective dose for most of my main muscle groups. So enough to maintain in those two workouts alone. And then I'll have a rest day, and then I'll do target area 1, target area 2, and maybe if they want to do a fifth session, target area 3. So nice. It might go front body, back body, push, pull. Front body, back body, legs, push. Front body, back body, posterior chain, arms. I can push the target areas away from maintenance and into the higher levels of these numbers through those second workouts of the week. And I think that works well for most people, where I can have a system where I don't have to spend hours programming a blank page for every single client. I've got the template. I go, what areas do you want to work on? Okay, that's going to be your later 2 workouts of the week. What's your limitations? Oh, okay, I changed back squat to safety bar squat or deadlift to trap bar. And then my programming's done. It's easier for me.
And more variation,
and we can work with it. So what's your second favorite hypertrophy method?
My second is pre or post exhaustion methods.
Ooh, so interesting.
So where, you know, as you know, it's very brutal. So let's say we're doing a leg day. We may do a leg extension, then a back squat, or the reverse. We might do a back squat straight into a leg extension. I love that method for similar reasons to the drop sets. They're fucking brutal. They're brutal. Yeah,
what I like about them as well is that you can maybe get more of as long as someone's stable, you can get a hypertrophy response on less load, which is always a benefit. The more load, the more higher chance of injury eventually, right? So if I could do a leg extensions first, and then you take what you would go on 100 kilos of back, put you the same stimulus from 80 kilos, you're safer and you're getting the same result out of it.
Yeah, my clients love that shit. Like, actually, just touching on the drop sets. I do a lot of training sessions where the first exercise is one big drop set.
I used to do that. I used to do a Jamie Alton workout where you start with 100 leg extensions in as few sets as possible, then go into your back squats. That was overkill. This is the reason why I think that I used to have 23-inch quads but no hamstrings, and this is the reason why I have lots of issues with my hip now.
Whose program was that?
Jamie Alton. I'm not calling out Jamie. Jamie didn't coach me. Jamie did not coach me and go, that's good for Simon. Jamie is a genetic powerhouse, a military man, and a very, very phenomenal physique. Yeah. This is a program that he did, that I decided without knowing my body that I'm also going to do.
Yeah.
I love Jamie Alton. I've met him as well. Nice guy, good social media too.
So I love using that pre and post exhaustion method for those reasons, similar to the drop sets. You can see what sort of stuff I like.
Yeah, you like the high volumes, you like the pump stuff. So did I for a long time. Less so now.
But that's because 70% of the time I prioritize a lot more strength stuff with my clients. Even when they're doing hypertrophy focused stuff, like I was still always 70% of the time prioritize 6 and under reps, you know?
Yeah. I also think as well, I know you deal with a lot of athletes, but it's a slight tangent, but I do think for those of you who coach listeners to chat, to work with general population clients, like non-athletes, they are somewhere in between the bodybuilder and the powerlifter. So the powerlifter or the strength athletes probably would like to look a little bit better naked, but they don't really care as more weight goes on the bar. The bodybuilder would probably like to be a bit stronger, but doesn't really care as long as they look better at the end. Most people are somewhere in the middle of the spectrum where, yes, the goals may be closer to the bodybuilder, but if they're not seeing progression in their weights for a block, they may go, well, this isn't working, let's just go and eat a pizza. It sounds counterintuitive, but you've got to psychologically help somebody else.
Yeah, totally.
And this is why we'll talk about this when we talk about strength, maybe next week. Wave loading is one of my favorite strategies, but we'll leave that for another episode. What were you going to say?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, discussing that, age is really important, biological age, because I work with a lot of youth athletes that play high-level sport, and we do 5 reps, 3 reps, 6 reps, and they like some of the boys are coming in and they're jacked. They got shoulders, biceps, you know what I mean? And they're using real heavy weights, but not much sort of volume methods, you know? Because their age and maturing at young ages, you know, hormones, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
My second one is also a post-exhaust method. But obviously you've outlined why post-exhaust method is good. So I'm just going to give you quick couple of examples of a couple of programs I quite like to use. So I quite like to use post-exhaust, as you said, to push people past failure. I quite like triceps where I may do 8, 8, 15. So it could be and that could be the same muscle group, or I may do chest, back, and then chest again to give a little bit of rest, and then you'll do the post-exhaust on the 15. Nice. So that's good for slightly more beginners where going straight into a post-exhaust, maybe it'll get sloppy. If I have an antagonist in the middle, it just separates that and they'll get more out of it overall. Yeah. My second one I quite like is what Cassim would call a local tension-based system. So this is where I may use something in the A series, like an incomplete rest method. So rather than supersetting my A series, I want them to focus on getting good at a certain lift, let's say. So maybe in my strength stuff, I'm doing dumbbell presses. That's my main bulk of my workout. In this accumulation phase, I still want them to get good at dumbbell presses. So I might do A series, just dumbbell press, but have an incomplete rest. So I'll do, let's say, 5 sets of 6 with a 30-second, 40-second rest in between. So we're now creating more tension at muscle by using rest periods as a way to create more stress on the muscle. And then I'll use my B series as a post-exhaust on exercises that are way more stable.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I really like that method, like creating density on the A exercise. And that's also really important, to disrupt and create that hormonal cascade that we're looking for hypertrophy. It's really important that we a lot of times have incomplete rest periods, more so for fat loss because of the benefits that we can get. But, incomplete almost rest periods are really beneficial as well.
I've seen lots of benefits recently of using it as a deload because it's really anti-inflammatory. And also I've seen a lot of online clients like it because they don't have to superset stuff. So they can stay on the same machine and they can get in and out the gym in 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes. And I had a client who has real bad issues with inflammation, a lot of back pain and things like this. And thyroid issues. All of the symptoms have improved just by doing an incomplete rest method and just less overall intensity. It's been a game changer. What's your third favorite method for hypertrophy?
Well, I love fancy methods, right? Sometimes my last one is cluster hypertrophy methods.
This is one I don't use very often, so I'm intrigued to hear your rationale here.
Well, like I said, I use a lot of heavy strength lifting for a lot of my clients. And we use a lot of cluster systems for hypertrophy. We might do, if the target is 10 reps, we might do 5, rest and 5. We might do 5 reps, rest 15 seconds, do another 5. We get to use a higher intensity and a higher load.
I like that. I like that a lot. I don't use clusters much, and I feel I should.
And it's fun. It's not fun having to re-rack the bar all the time if you're doing squats and shit. But when people know how to set up correctly, like we discussed earlier, there's not much time being wasted having to re-rack and unrack the bar. So I think that's a poor excuse from people to say it takes too long to whatever, just, you know what I mean? But you would select an appropriate exercise. I think dumbbell presses are brilliant to do cluster hypertrophy methods with. Just bang out 4 reps, put them down, bang out another 4. You know what I mean? Rest them on the knees, bang out another 4.
Yeah.
And there's some really good research on hypertrophy using cluster methods, you know?
Yeah.
So you're just taking short rest periods in between each micro set, if you want to call it a micro set.
I like that. So number 3 for me, I originally had written down escalating density training. And I'm not going to say that. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about strength methods. EDT is not a strength method. But I use EDT, and I'll speak about this maybe more next week, as a deload from a strength block to give people more confidence lifting the bar. I use it more to get people to lift more load than I do for hypertrophy. So the method I'm going to say as my number 3 is modified Dumbbell method. So the Dumbbell method, for people who don't know, let's say your A series is trap bar deadlift, that's your main lift. You do trap bar deadlift, you do whatever exercise you do for your A2, and then you'll come back and do trap bar deadlift again for higher weight. The idea being that you're going to do practice a lot more at the main lift, you can lift a lot more load, you do a lot more of these big compound lifts. Cool, understand. The reason why I say modified is because most people, unless they're really, really structurally sound or really, really advanced, probably can't do back squat, chin up, back squat. That second load of back squat for high rep, they're going to be awful. And it's not going to be effective, and it's probably going to be causing you more chance of injury. My modification would be your second series is a similar movement pattern, but it's now going to be more stable. So, for example, RDL, it'd be an incline dumbbell press, and then go to an incline hyper. It is still a hip hinge variation, but it's more stable where you can go close to failure. Could be back squat, chin up, hack squat, or back squat, chin up, goblet squat, or trap bar squat. So something that is more stable and easier to do. So you go, let's say, 8 of one, 8 of the antagonist, and then you go 15 or so for the.
You know what would be really fun if you did a back squat and then a chin up or whatever, and then did like a belt squat or something. Wrecked into a belt squat and rep them, you know, that would be hard, man.
Yeah. Pendulum squat would be like an Atlantis pendulum squat would be amazing.
Fuck that. That's too hard, man.
Yeah, I've done that with people. It's great. So I know you got to shoot off soon, but I do want to finish off with what is your most overrated hypertrophy, the one that you think people use way too much and you don't rate it.
Oh man, like
I've got one in mind.
There's a few. You know what? Like, I don't know whether a lot of people use it for hypertrophy building muscle purposes, but I think it's very, very overrated for if they are using it for that. And that's the 6-12-25 method.
Interesting. I almost went for that, but I didn't. So why don't you like it?
You know what? I think it's overkill. I think it's overkill. And if you're doing 3-4 sets with 2-minute recoveries after your 6-12-25, I don't think it's enough. If you're using it to drive volume, I don't think it's enough volume potentially. And if you are using it to drive sort of heavy loads, I think by the time you get back round to a 6-rep max, like they say you're meant to use, it's not a fucking 6-rep max. You know?
I couldn't agree more.
Like a conjugate tricep. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'd rather do 6 deadlifts and then do that.
I'd rather do it like
quality
this.
work, and then do 12 split squats after, and then maybe 25 leg presses. You know what I mean?
I would rather use this as a post-exhaust method and do 4 sets of 6 on the back squat. B1, 12 split squats per leg into 25 leg extensions. So 6 on its own, 12, 25. You know, use it as the post-exhaust, like you like, rather than interfering with the squat.
I think it can be good for beginners because they don't have to lift heavy loads. But then you're always finding, like, the 6, like, okay, well, they're not technically efficient on the squat, so we're not going to use a 6 on the squat. So why don't we use a trap bar deadlift? Maybe, you expose them to heavy loads. But then you're going to do a 12 and a 25 on the same muscle group as well. It's just too much, you know, and coordination is going to get shit, and you know, it's just going to fail. It's going to look like shit most of the time. But I have used it for.
You can modify that though, right? 8, 10, 15, 6, 12, 15. No, 6, 10, 15. It doesn't have to be 6, 12, 25.
No, and why is it not 6, 12, 24, right? That's what everyone always says to me. Why is it 25? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. I didn't make it up. But fucking hell, why is it 25? Why is it not 24? 6, 12, 24.
Why do we never do 9 to 13 reps?
Right. Actually, I saw someone post yesterday. They did like a 9, 9, 7, 7, 5, 5. And I really wanted to comment and say, why are you fucking doing odd numbers for, man? You should know it's only even numbers. Actually, one of my favorite wave loading is 753, 753. It just annoys me when people say, I'm doing 3 sets of 11 on the bench press now. I'm like, shut up. You know?
My most overrated method is German volume training.
Well, that was my second most overrated because it's fucking boring.
Exactly. Like even if it worked, how long can you do it before you're bored to tears?
So why don't you like it? Because I've got a few reasons why I think it's shit as well.
I think the main reason is because it's boring. The second reason is because the load you'd have to use is so pants, because you have to consider you want to do the same weight for 10 reps. So the first 6 sets are probably useless.
Therefore, they say you have to use 60%.
Yeah. I also think that, let's use the chest for an example, right? We have a fan-shaped muscle that has fibers that go in the upper part, fibers that come across the middle, fibers come down, right? 90% of your workout is doing one of those. So you're not going to get a complete workout for the chest anyway. Charles's was better. 5 sets flat bench, 5 sets incline. Charles's modified GVT is better, but I wouldn't say it was great either.
Yeah. I don't think there's enough exercise variation in there. And using 60% of your 1 rep max, well, I think we can get more intensity with the same amount of volume reps elsewhere. Like maybe the variation on the method, but I think it's very, very boring. Although sometimes, like we said, you do have to get in and do stuff that you don't like, but I don't think this is a good method. I don't think it's a good method.
But you don't like because it's hard and you suck at it rather than it's boring.
But I mean, you know what they say, right? They say, oh, you know, when you get to set 7 and 8, it gets hard. You won't get your reps in, and then 9 and 10, you will. That's what a lot of people say. Just shut up. It's bullshit, you know.
It's not how fatigue works. Girls, maybe recover quicker. Guys, not.
Maybe. I just don't think it's a good method to use. And with a beginner, like maybe that it should be 4, because it's 60% of the 1 rep max or something, you know.
Joe Wicks does it.
Yeah, but
Joe Wicks doing home workouts and things like that. You've got to understand it's different.
He's not even a fucking trainer, man. You know what I mean?
He's a marketer now. He's a book salesman.
Yeah.
He's a chef.
I think GVT is boring. I've used advanced German volume training, which I think is fun because we get to lift heavy ass weights, 10 sets of 6. That's fun. But I think 10 sets of 10 for hypertrophy, you can have way more fun workouts with different shit, right? You know what I'm saying? So
I couldn't agree more. Well, I think we've covered a good full range of ideas for hypertrophy. People have got inspired.
Just one thing.
Go.
Knees over toes, yeah? They use a lot of 5 sets of 10, 10 sets of 10 on like fucking Poliquin step downs and all this. Like, and they're like, oh my God, like density and all this. And half of them doing the fucking exercise is wrong. So again, like, there's all these ATG coaches out there. They're doing some bullshit fucking methods and putting exercises together really fucking shockingly.
Should we do an episode on?
Have you not seen these ATG coaches?
I've seen these ATG coaches. Should we do an episode as a bit of a trailer? You know how the other week me and Rob did Andrew. Do you remember the other week me and Rob did controversy? We talked about Andrew Tate and Liver King. Let's do an episode. We talk about, I don't know, knees over toes guy and somebody else, and we discuss the training methods, because I think you have a lot to say here, and I know you've got to shoot off shortly. So, but I there's things I like. I don't mind the knees over toes guy, but I think I will share some of your views against as a contrary. So I think that'll be an interesting episode.
I don't mind him either. He's a nice guy. I just think
that's always good. We're talking about his professional qualities, and the first thing you say is a nice guy. This doesn't assume that you like his training methods.
No, you know what?
He's very friendly.
Some of the stuff is fantastic. You know what I mean? And some of the methods to get people out of pain, it's amazing. They're helping people. It's great. But the ideology and the method is like, this isn't the only way to do it. And it's only helping this many people, probably because it has so many people going through it.
That's very
true. I mean? Like, it's debatable. And I really, the reason that I don't like it as much is because the coaches that they're getting out from it they really fucking suck, man. Some of the shit I see on socials, they're shocking. Some of these techniques that these coaches are doing, they're so bad. Like, they're doing Peterson step downs. They're not even doing them right.
I also think with these things as well, like, Knees Over Toes guy, what he posts online is about structural balance stuff, right? Really has its place, but it's one asset of training. Now, if I went to train with Ben Patrick, I'm sure he might do that with me for the first 5 to 6 weeks, and then he'd probably move on to another method. But what you see, his marketing, his brand is about that stuff, because no one comes to him for advanced hypertrophy methods. People come to him to get out of pain. I'm not saying he can't do hypertrophy. It's like Brett Contreras puts up a lot of glute videos because he's the glute guy. It doesn't mean if I say, get me big arms, Brett, he wouldn't know how to do it. And I think sometimes we look at that too much.
But this is it. One of their methods in the Athletic Truth Group method, the Knees Over Toes method, is to do 10 sets of 10 Poliquin step downs.
That's a unilateral exercise. That is a boring ass session.
10 sets of 10 every minute on the minute or whatever. So, I mean, yeah, like...
That's 20 sets of 10.
Why?
There's 20 sets of 10.
That? Exactly.
So I suppose to play devil's advocate there, is it an argument that somebody there who has knee pain needs to do more good reps than bad reps because they're going to leave that gym session, someone in knee pain, and they're going to do lots of really bad steps. So I am now doing 20 reps of workout. I'm doing 200 steps in that session.
Exactly. So it's just, you're just trying to push volume in it and stress. But I think there are better methods to do that for people. You know what I mean? Than the GVT, like we explained, you know? Most
people need to get strong, and this is the reason why a lot of pain is there.
Exactly.
Weak ass hamstrings will get you. If you get strong ass hamstrings, you'll get out of more knee pain than 90% of this knee stuff, this VMO stuff that people like to prescribe. Get strong hamstrings, and if that doesn't work, then look at the knee. Strong hamstrings, strong hips. If you can sort those things out, then look at the knee. But until you sort that shit, I haven't done a Poliquin step up in, or Peterson step up in, I don't know, years. It's not necessary. There's more important stuff to deal with. It's last resort. It's last tick on the box.
And then to say that the tibialis anterior is the main reason why people have knee pain is just stupid as well, you know?
Yes. You always got to think of the muscles that are looking at that bring up the foot arch. Now, I'm no expert at foot arch. I'm in the Integra project at the moment. Shout out to Michael Goulden. I did my first week this week, going an hour on the foot mechanics and the foot structures and joints. Oh my God.
There's a ton.
So deep. It is so complex. I've got homework to do. I'm going to watch it again, maybe today. But on that note, man, this has been awesome.
All right, thank you.
No worries. One closing piece of advice. If you had to give someone one piece of advice, wants to build muscle, what would you give them?
Get fucking strong.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Steve, thank you as always. I'll see you next week.
Cheers, brother. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.